Hey guys, welcome back to Steel City Roundtable. I am Mark Kneebone, one of your hosts, and sitting with me today is my wonderful co-host for the day, Natalie Snyder.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me back, Mark.
Always, I'll have you back anytime you want. Now, we've had some technical difficulties today. Camera's shit in the bed, and this is going to be a short one because we're on a time frame, but we wanted to get something out this week, so we're going to at least do something quick for you guys. Like I said, we'd like to do a full hour and 15 minutes, but we had some issues with some cameras I bought from China. And granted, I bought this before the election, so I will never buy cameras from China again.
I'm shocked to hear that.
It's so annoying because you've been sitting here for an hour. You've been sitting here for 45 minutes to an hour. Everything was working, and then it all stopped.
Maybe it was me.
No, I think the camera. I see. I would take a political stance here, but then this is not a political show. But yeah. So, how was your week?
It's been an interesting week.
Yeah.
Busy. Busy with a lot of court. Busy with dealing with a lot of
Nonsense.
nonsense and some difficult personalities.
Well, you walked into the fire, babe, because I'm one of those personalities.
You are. So let's chat about that.
Okay. So, what do you want to talk about?
So I'm of the impression, because I overanalyze everything, as do you, but there are kind of a chunk of certain personality types that tend to gravitate towards law enforcement. And I had a couple people weigh in on this, and I've come to the conclusion there's like the type A people that want everything, dot, 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 dot. You've got the military folks. Oh, and by the way, happy Veterans Day
Yes.
to everyone.
Happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. And I mean military mindset, not as a disrespect to the military, but that general militant mindset. So on to personality type number 3 is I was bullied in school, so now I have a badge and I want to be a badass. And then there's the fourth general category, which is the legacy folks who come from either a short line or a long line of officers that went before them, and they're following up behind them. Then, of course, because I have to go here inevitably every episode, there's the certain personality type of women that decide to become police officers.
Yes.
That fall into, I think, 2 categories, which is I took this job, it's primarily male dominated, I'm going to take it like a man, quote unquote. And then there's I want to do this and have the air of I'm going to take it like a man, but then I'm going to complain when things happen to me that shouldn't, solely because I'm a woman. So
pick a category and we'll go through them one by one. You want a notebook?
no, I think the category I'm stuck on lately and what I've had to deal with is I have a case with an officer like this coming up, and it's weighing heavily, I'm pretty sure they were picked on in school and bullied, and so they decided they were going to be an officer, and they used their badge to be big and bad and intimidate people and basically retaliate for them being bullied.
So the kid in the locker, kid in the garbage can.
Yes,
I worked with a few of those.
I have no doubt. So it is something that exists, not just something that Natalie's made up in her own mind.
No, I think you're right. I think there's many different types of law enforcement officers. You got type A personalities that were born to take the lead. Mm-hmm. There were the followers, which do not operate outside of an area where they are following instructions, right? So there's the officers that come on a job to have that structure, mm-hmm. right? There's the officers that come on the job because it's fraternal. Their whole family has done it, so it's a legacy.
Yep.
And then you are definitely correct, which I think there's another group, but let's go to the one you mentioned. There's the ones that got picked on, and that want to establish their authority in every situation possible and make up for what they felt they were wronged by. Mm-hmm. And then there's the officers that failed at everything else and took this job because they thought it was an easy paycheck. You can't forget those.
Okay, and of those last 2 categories, the kid in the garbage can and the easy paycheck, I think that those are the most dangerous officers on the streets.
100%. Those are the ones that get people killed.
Yes.
Or make bad decisions that kill people.
Correct. I think that the kid in the garbage can officers tend to make more volatile, dangerous decisions. The easy paycheck ones end up making bad decisions out of sheer laziness.
Yes and no. I think that the when you talk about the officer that's trying to make up for being picked on their entire lives, they make their decisions normally based off emotion. Emotion and the necessity to be in charge. You know what I'm saying?
Are you categorizing rage as an emotion?
Well, anger. Yeah, anger is rage, right? You know, so say you have an officer that got picked on a lot in high school, and they get on a job, they get through the academy, and like everybody out there that's gone through the academy knows who they are because they saw it the first 5 seconds they were in the academy. They're like, this guy's a douche, or this girl's a douche canoe, and they're going to cause nothing but problems. But what happens is, you get that first interaction with that officer, and then they become the ones you don't want coming on your calls because they instigate things.
And that's from another officer
Give you
perspective.
an example. So, with my background, I've worked with quite a few like that, but one in particular sticks out in my brain. He was the guy that you would go on a call and you would clear it like a domestic or something, and you would resolve it enough that they didn't kill each other, they didn't beat each other up, and that they were done. And then this person would show up at the end of the call and be like, what did these two morons do? You know what I mean? Something like that. And you're like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing? Like, you just caused an issue.
Escalated to de-escalated.
Because they always have to put their information into the circle. They always have to have a part of the call. Even if it's not their call, they always have to be involved somehow. So you got to the point where if you worked with this person, you were like, I don't want to do anything all day long because I don't want to get put in that scenario where I got to deal with this bullshit again, where I have to shut this guy up, or I have to sit there and look at the people like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's his call, whatever, The second type, or the last type of ours, the little people that took this job because they thought, what the hell? They normally don't do shit. They normally don't do shit. They normally sit there and do as little as possible to get through the day, to get their paycheck and go home. And to be honest with you, they are the most dangerous ones out there because they have no tactical awareness. They have no skin in the game. Like, they just go to their calls, and half the time I think they don't even know what they're doing. Like, they're not thinking about it when they're there. Like, it's the guy that you're on a traffic stop, and he's pulling his phone out to check his text messages while you're on a traffic stop. Like, they're not tactically involved in the situation. Not having a skin in the game, not having a reason, not having a, as we like to use those words, articulable reason of why you're a police officer. You just took the job because it sounded like a good idea. Those are a lot of times the officers that are making big mistakes because they're just not there for the right reason. The guy that wants to prove himself and wants to have authority, the type A personality, the legacy, most of the time, even though, they may have the reason that they, don't want to be there a little bit, they normally tend to be more into what's going on. They tend to pay more attention to what's going on. It's when you have somebody that has no legitimate reason to be doing this job, like half of the Pittsburgh area police officers these days. They have no reason being police officers. I mean, I think you're coming back to what you said. The last two categories are the most dangerous because they instigate, they're not aware, stereotypically, sweeping generalization with a big brush.
I know how I see it on my end once it's in a courtroom or, once I'm reading the reports, the complaints.
I thought you said you wanted to talk about something that I would disagree with today.
We'll trip into it maybe. But is it, as an officer, going back to something you said, working with them or responding with them, is it a discomfort? Yes, clearly you said it is.
100%.
Does it make you, as a fellow officer, fearful? Do you feel like they make situations more volatile and potentially put you in danger by either their ineptitude or their general attitude have something to prove?
So let me clarify first, because we're in court right now. So by fearful, do you mean just having a natural level of fear, or like being completely scared shitless that this person's going to do something wrong?
I think natural level of fear is going to be present in any situation.
If you don't have that, you shouldn't be a cop.
If you're not, you're the fourth category we just talked about.
Yeah.
No, an upped level because of their mere presence.
I don't think fear is the word I would use. Apprehension
Okay.
is a better word, because say you you have a traffic stop, right, and you're in a rough part of town, and you get a car that, yes, cops profile people. It's part of what they are taught to do is to read the situation and determine whether something may or may not happen, or to read in the entire 360 and try to figure out what to do. So yes, they do profile. But say you're in a bad neighborhood where and by profile I mean like what I'm going to tell you. Say you're in a bad neighborhood, a lot of gun calls, a lot of violence calls, a lot of open air crime, a lot of drug sales. That's a profile. and you go there and you do a traffic stop and you get a car that's completely tinted out, it's occupied 4 times, you can't see inside the car until you get up to the window and the window opens and smoke comes out the window and you're just like, you're already there. You're already from here to here. You've already gotten your reasonable suspicion that something's going on. Or sorry, reasonable suspicion, and you're working on your probable cause. So you sit there and then you hear this person call out on the radio as your backup. Me, 9 times out of 10, I was like, you know what, kid? You just put your seatbelts on, drive safe. I don't want to see you again tonight. Hit the road. Because I wanted to avoid a federal lawsuit. I wanted to avoid getting in some type of use of force where I end up having to beat the crap out of somebody because this idiot comes on the call and starts some shit. So I think your level of apprehension is up. And it's not the apprehension you want. Like, you're going to be amped up on a traffic stop if you got all the signs that are telling you something might be wrong, right? Something might be afoot. But you don't need that added stress level of worrying about what your backup is going to do. You know, that, I think that's a big problem is, you know, officers need to know that their backup has been trained the same way as they are, which they are, and that they're going to act accordingly. And they're going to act by the common sense of law. You know, like, common sense is its own thing that they don't teach.
True.
You know, they expect someone that comes on a call to do the right thing, to do the reasonable thing, reasonable objective. You know that one as well. That's what you assume they're going to do when they come on a call. When you know somebody's not going to act that way, you just rather not have the call. You'd rather just cut them loose and keep going.
And a flip side perspective, by the time I see it and we're in court, what I always find interesting is you'll see trends.
Their report writing is amazing.
You'll see trends where you have certain officers that are never the affiant, but their name appears and they're always there. And coincidentally, they always seem to be there when it's some shady shitstorm. And I honestly, defense attorney or not, I feel bad for the officer that somehow, I don't know how it happened, but got stuck being the affiant and has to pen and swear. And I've noticed that if it's a good, seasoned enough officer, they make sure to throw that person's name in there consistently so that a pattern is revealed, because it's like you get to a point to save, I would think, my guess, to save your own credibility, that you're not going to take the heat for something you didn't do that you don't agree with.
Well, that's where I think as an officer, when you know, report writing is one of the most important, if not the most important thing you're ever going to learn. I think when you have a case like that, like where you have a use of force that's questionable, or you have a search incident to arrest, or any type of seizure that is questionable, it's as per officer so-and-so, stated by officer so-and-so. Officer so-and-so told me this. Officer so-and-so did this. Officer so-and-so did that. It's very important for the officer that's handling that arrest, writing that affidavit, to make sure that they clarify very, very clearly what everybody does. Because that way, when it comes down to the carpet and there's the question of, well, Officer Kneebone, you're the affidavit of this arrest. Can you tell me what you saw Officer so-and-so did? And unless you actually saw it, you cannot testify to it. You can testify to your report, to the information contained in the four corners of your affidavit, and say, you know, this is what was relayed to me by Officer so-and-so. His actions were his actions. You're going to have to ask him about that.
And it's very, very convenient once you establish a rapport or a knowledge of certain officers that you have repeatedly, that, as I see it, suddenly some of the world's most observant officers and observant people, always at certain times, could not personally observe. And I see that as a huge flag, not of necessarily anything bad, but of where to draw my line with the officer that's trying to save his credibility and his integrity, that I want no parts of that.
And that's very questionable. That's a very dangerous path to take, because
But the ones that start on it, stay on it.
you know, you and I make an arrest, and no offense, you're a jackass. You do something really fucking stupid, and I saw it, and I testify that I didn't see it. Like, granted, yes, you're covering your own ass, but you're also opening yourself up to perjury. Because what if somebody says, well, Officer Nebo was standing right next to so-and-so when this happened. What about the camera footage from the car? What about the body cam footage? Like, all that shit's got to match up.
Funny you say that. Open yourself up for perjury, and I've stood there on both sides of it and been pretty darn sure it was happening. It's not a light accusation, but at least in my experience, it's not a mechanism that gets used. And part of me often wonders if, not inappropriately, but if it was used more, if we could resolve or change that aspect of people, of officers doing stupid shit and then lying by omission, lying by dancing around, lying by not
Collateral
telling.
misconduct is what it is.
Yes.
Collateral misconduct is basically knowing or seeing or witnessing something going on that you know is not right, not legal, not justified, and not stopping it, or not reporting it, or not addressing it. Like,
How many times did you see it reported? Or
I'm not gonna lie. I mean, you see it a lot in the city. You see it a lot in the city
somebody
because
stepping up and saying something?
no. You see those mistakes a lot in the city. You see those types of reports written a lot in the city of Pittsburgh because their standards have dropped so low on who they will hire. Like, listen, this all comes back to the people at the academy, and don't get me wrong, they got a full plate. You know, all the instructors at the academy, they got to get people through. They got to get people on the streets because they don't have any freaking manpower. But the instructors see this shit at the academy level. They see when someone is maybe not cut out for this. And the big problem is when they tell upper management about this, they're told to shut up. They're told that they'll be fine.
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up. As you're aware, I'm an instructor at the County Police Academy.
I would love to do that.
And
Love it.
the first time that I did this, I only took part in the simulations for court and for hearings. And, my colleagues and I ran into a couple, we'll leave it at problematic cadets, to which, my colleague and I that were the primary two people doing this were like, this is not good. This is not. And, we were in a situation where we were lucky that we were listened to at that point, and potentially situations were resolved and handled before it was too late. But, for 25 years, I've been looking at these officers, and there was a city officer who was a friend of mine, who I liked as a human being, but dear God, should not have been a police officer and was a danger to themselves and anybody around them. And, I know from my standpoint, it's an awkward position for officers on a personal level when I've had a chance to talk to them. Then you don't want to say anything because you're not sure if you really saw or didn't see, or you start to question yourself because you want to think the best of your coworkers for the sake of the department, but also for the sake of...
No.
I think some people really do.
I think at the end of the day, you got to think about your family, your house, your job. Fuck the other guy. If they're going to do something fucked up, it's on them. And that's
agree.
why I highly suggest that if you see something fucked up, either deal with it right then and there, or you do what you got to do to deal with it, because that is the person that's going to get you in federal court and have all your shit taken away and lock you behind bars because you did the right thing, but you allowed some other idiot to do the wrong thing and never address it.
Well, and isn't that kind of a little bit of a throwback to our last time together and the BS nature of this?
I mean, there's times of blue line matters. To me, it matters. The blue line isn't just this thing that you throw up in the air.
An excuse.
Yeah, it's not an excuse. It's not the thin blue line, I think, does exist. It should exist in a much more transparent way, in that the thin blue line just means that, hey, listen, when we're on the streets, we look out for each other. That's what the thin blue line should be. It shouldn't be like, oh, you fuck up and I got to follow no, I don't have to follow the thin blue line if you're a fucking asshole and you're going to get me sued.
Look out for each other does not equate to cover up,
Look
ignore,
out for
or
you
walk
means
away.
get home safely every night. Get home safely every night. And there's been times in my career where I had to address people either during, after, or at court and be like, you did some fucked up shit. Don't ever do that again. I mean, it wasn't illegal, but it was like, we wrote it the way it happened. But it was one of those things like, I'm like, listen, there's no reason for you to have taken it to this level, right? So like use of force, big thing, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of cops, meatheads, are big to go quick. It's the little guy that has to prove themselves, that has been picked on, that always wants to go hands-on right away. So you could have a situation completely fucking handled, and then this person shows up, and next thing you know, they're going hands-on, and you're like afterwards like, dude, I don't need your shit. There's no reason for you to even get involved in this. You caused this whole thing. Now, granted, the actor, suspect, presumed innocent until guilty, did something first, right? Did something to instigate the arrival of the police.
Allegedly.
Did something at some point that arose to the level where an officer has to use force, right?
Okay.
But that can be avoided so many times just by talking to someone and realizing how they talk, relate to them, not be their friend, but like understand that this is the way they talk. Because there's times you got to yell at people. There's times you got to use fucking fuck you, fuck this, fuck that. And there's times you be like, sir, just take a breath. You know, it's, I
Well,
think,
why aren't there more officers utilizing that?
because they quit. They quit because they can't stand the way law enforcement is right now because it's a fucking shit show. I wasn't the best officer by any means. Anybody that you ever run into that knows me as an officer will say, well, that guy had to put his nose into everything because I always wanted to take control of every situation. But I didn't have to use force a lot.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I was able to diffuse things a lot of the time. Just because I think one of the lost skills, and it is a skill, it's something you're born with, is the ability to take an interaction and very quickly make an impression on someone and very quickly take in who that person is. You know, like how they're acting, how they're behaving, their body language, just reading the whole situation in a very quick 30 seconds and knowing that, like, okay, I think this is the way I got to go with this guy, or I think this is the path I have to go, you know?
But see, that implies the ability to do that implies, something else that plays into all of this.
Interpersonal skills.
Well, interpersonal skills, but that I see as a huge officer problem that I have seen as a huge officer problem since I was a prosecutor. It's not just a dark side opinion, is interpersonal skills lacking. But ego is a huge, huge problem. And the worst part about it it's not confidence. It's the pompous ass ego. It's the ego that's not based on anything. It's the ego that needs to be fed by being a meathead, but by picking on someone not your own size. That this is how you are, and that, I think that ego translates into, they can't set that aside to meet someone where they are for the greater good of a situation. They're going in the way they're going to go in. This is just how I do it. This is just who I am and how I am. And
That's the way it was done in the 70s. That's the way it was done in the 70s. You know, old school policing was, rule with an iron fist. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody spit on you, you knocked them out. Someone was standing on a street corner, you told them to leave, you come back a half hour later, you're still there, like, listen, bro, you're either going to hit the ground or you're going to be gone. And then they would just either stay there and get their ass kicked or they would leave. You know, that's not the way that policing should be, and it's not the way policing is. You know, contrary to what you thought, I think most officers agree, most of the time, the people that you find that are quick to aggression and to hold that ego are the smaller people. This is going to be unpopular, but a lot of women, because they feel they have to prove something. It's not usually the big, strong guys. The big, strong guys are usually confident enough in their abilities to handle a situation, both verbally and physically, if it needs to get physical, that they don't push the physical issue because they know, like, I'm going to fuck this dude up.
I agree with that because some of the physically largest officers I've dealt with, your typical meathead, whether they were in narcotics, because, a lot of them seem to find their way to narcotics back in the day, or, even more recently, some of the younger, as compared to me, officers that are, the big meathead looking, may not be the brightest, but who I have yet to ever see or hear an accusation or a report that indicates any use of force whatsoever. And that, a lot of them are right now being tapped for more community-oriented type things, which is, in the sense, is interesting to me because they're the ones that can actually communicate, where at initial read you would assume Mr. Gigantic Meathead can't. But unfortunately, I agree with what you said. When you've got Scrappy Dog on scene, that's a bigger part of the problem. I remember 100 years ago, there was a female officer who was new-ish, not green, but new-ish. And she had been assaulted by a defendant, and she was whining up a storm about it. And finally, I'm talking to her because she's the officer on my case. I'm the prosecutor. And throughout my conversation with her, she finally gets to the point where she literally looks at me and she's like, and the person had, I think, shoved her, hadn't even struck her. I think it was a shove. Mm-hmm. And her response when I finally pushed her, like, I'm trying to find out what the hell happened, because of course you have a cop ag charge, and okay, was it real? I understand statutorily, but what really happened? And she finally fired back to me and was like, he can't push me, I'm a woman.
No, he can't push you because you're a cop.
Right.
Not because you're a woman.
And I looked at her, I'm like, what? And she repeated it. And so I did one of these. I literally looked down at myself and I looked at her and I was like, no, that's not how it works. Well, yes, it is how it works. That's what the statute says. And I
doesn't.
opened the book and
What
I
does it say,
pointed it
female?
to her. Right. And I was like, no, it's by virtue of your badge, not your body parts.
On the street, and if you're a female, if you're man enough to hit first, as a person on the street, not a cop, if you're man enough to hit first, you better expect one coming back, because I don't know
It's
if you know
coming
this, but
back.
police officers are still a protected class. Granted, they have to protect you at all costs. They are still a protected class, and that you cannot put your hands on them. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the way it's worked. If you read it, it's, of course, then you got Allegheny County, who, about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, made it that in the city of Pittsburgh, if you wanted to charge aggravated assault against a police officer, you had to call the DA's office and get approval first. So, no. It's the big problem is, so I'm a big proponent of women in law enforcement, believe it or not. I think that everybody deserves a chance to be a cop. And I think at the end of the day, it's your performance that determines whether you suck or not. No DEI here. No DEI here. No. It's performance based, So I worked with some women that were stormtroopers that could beat the shit out of people. I worked with some people that if they were coming on my call, I got off that call and I closed it and I moved on because I didn't want to deal with it. But there's a lot of men that, listen, I had a guy try to bite my finger off. Literally bit it down to the bone, and then I choke slammed him and my partner at the same time. And I didn't even think that was going to go through court as an injury. He bit through my finger to the point where there was bone showing, and I had to get all those shots. I had to take the cocktail to avoid getting, to all those diseases. And, thank God my department, my supervisory chain of command handled business and did what they needed to do. They got a search warrant for the blood for his person to make sure he didn't have any diseases, and then I got to get off the cocktail, and then blah, 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 blah. But, this comes back to a bigger problem, with aggravated assault against a police officer. It's not supported by the local judicial system to the extent it should be. It should still be, if you put your hands on a cop, it's automatically aggravated assault. Doesn't matter if they're injured. Doesn't matter if they have a long sustaining injury where they have to seek treatment over the next 5 years, which is what they want. If you want to get a if you want to win a case for aggravated assault against a police officer, you better damn well break your leg, break your neck, have back surgery, not be able to walk for 6 years, because it's probably going to get dropped down to simple assault at best in criminal court or in the initial hearing and be thrown out because nobody wants to pursue that. Except for the officer.
I agree, but also what I see quite often is officers with more time on, and not out of frustration and I just don't want to deal with this, but legitimately are like, I've been doing this long enough where they are okay with dropping things.
Yes.
And that they're like, and I had this happen myself where it was like, okay, I'm not going to argue with you when I'm coming up to you at the prelim that it's not ag. That's not my argument. My argument is it absolutely is statutorily.
What are you willing to do?
Because I'm not an idiot and I can read and that's what it says, but are you willing to do anything? And I've had officers that were like, no, absolutely not, and won't say anything further. And I've had officers be like, all right, he was drunk and being a moron and he had tequila balls and we can just deal with, whatever.
I mean, a lot of times the officer has to take into account the entire situation. Like, why did this person do what they did? Did they do it out of malicious intent? Were they trying to hurt the officer, or they did it because they thought they were defending themselves? Like,
But that
and
takes
that's
a level of
that's the reason-
thought
that's the
from
reasonable thought
officers that a
process.
lot of them aren't
See,
willing to give.
If you can't do that, you shouldn't be a cop. If you can't think reasonably, and if you can't,
But you can't teach it,
if
but
you
yet
can't
we're still
be
letting them
attached
on
to
the job.
humanity, you still have to maintain your attachment to humanity.
But they're
and
still getting on the
human
job
condition.
because they need
suck.
people.
They suck. Those people suck.
But
those
those-
are the ones that do the shit down and fucking, all the shit that's going on in the news. Those are the idiots that do that shit.
Very small percentage of bad apples forget spoil and make life hard for the rest of you. But again, put the rest of you, former you, in danger. And that's the thing that I think is far more problematic, is it isn't just about you're an asshole and you shouldn't be a cop. There's lots of those. We can't seem to fix it. They're not getting weeded out when they should. But at the same time, above and beyond just being a crappy person is you're putting people in danger. And it's something, again, to circle back, if you don't have interpersonal skills and you don't have communication skills, You also, in the laundry list of jobs, you shouldn't have law enforcement or anything in the system, because I agree the same for lawyers and judges. You should not be in the system, but they seem to gravitate towards the system.
Yeah, I think the thing that's so attractive in being in the well, my former side of the coin, you know what I mean? Like being on the side that's filing the charges, you don't do that because you don't do that because you don't want to put people in jail. You want to put people in jail, just the right ones, the bad ones, the people that do bad things. You want to put them in jail. It's everybody that is in the judicial system who is in the prosecuting side of it, I believe has a level of eliteness to them. They think they're better. A lot of people think they're better. They think that wearing that badge puts you just a bit above everybody
The
else.
ego problem.
But it doesn't. It's an even playing field. If I would put my badge when I was a cop and put it on you and said, "This is a situation. How would you handle it?" I would expect that if you're a reasonable person, your answer would be somewhat similar to mine, in that procedurally, and by the eye of law, it would be
Because-
somewhat along the same line. Because it's just that. But now the different circumstances, whatever happened on the call, why you had to use force, this or that. But the reasoning would be the same. You would be able
Should be.
you would be able to articulate why you do what you do. What's happening now is officers are getting away with, I don't want to say getting away with it, but they do shit and they don't know how to justify it. You know what I mean? Like they make a decision, but then they're so poorly trained and they're so mentally unready to do the job that they don't know how to write what they did. Like, it's okay
Or
to
they
body
don't-
slam somebody.
Or they don't want to.
Like, it's okay to body slam somebody. If somebody comes at you with a knife and you body slam them, it's okay to write, "They came out with a knife. I felt threatened. I thought they were going to try to take my life, so I body slammed them." I mean,
But
it's
the
completely
ones-
justified.
Absolutely. But it's the ones that don't write that, don't include that. I find out from some other way, or I get an inkling that it could be. And then if I'm the one bringing it up to you, first of all,
gotten
that's
too far.
shady. It's gotten too far. But I'm sure you've seen these too. These are the people that absolutely hate defense attorneys just by virtue of our jobs, because we've pointed out what you didn't do. Because something that might be perfectly, I may not like it, my client may not like it, but had at least a basis or a justification. Where it's going to go in the end, we don't know. But your choice to not show that because you didn't want to fess up to what you really did, whatever your reasons are, make it look nefarious. And you made that choice to make yourself look bad. When I then pointed out and hand you a mirror to look at yourself, then you want to get butthurt and be all defensive, which is not a good look, period, because I think most people would agree, the minute you respond to an accusation, even a question, defensively,
It draws a bad light to you.
you look bad.
I think, in my experience, the thing I noticed the most is the officers that made questionable arrests were the quickest to plea, were the quickest to make deals. Because they wanted to get them guilty
See,
on something.
I see the opposite.
See, I always saw.
I see they're the ones that want to make the biggest freaking deal about it, and I'll not to all, but to some, in that situation, I'll be like, please don't make me do this. I have to. It's my job. It's my oath. Please don't make me do this. But they're convinced and they're of that mindset where the louder I am, the more right I am. And so if we want to fight this full bore, coming from their end, is honestly, in my experience, they're the slowest to agree to anything. And maybe it's just my wonderful delivery
I
that
think you're
they...
getting the worst combination. You're getting the person that's arrogant and the person that makes bad decisions. A cop that makes a bad decision, like once again, they have seconds to make a decision and a lifetime to regret it or deal with it. So say a cop makes a decision that isn't the best decision in the heat of the moment, and it's questionable. That officer is probably going to, in my mind, they're probably going to plea that case out as quick as possible because they want to avoid a long drawn out trial. They don't want to be, it's not that they don't want to be exposed, but they don't want to lose a case because they did something questionable and didn't write it well. There's a difference between doing something questionable and being able to justify it and write it, and the person that does something questionable and doesn't even know why they did it. And I think that's what you run in a lot of times is these ones know that these specific cops, they know they were doing something wrong or something questionable, and they're just going to defend it to the death because they don't believe they're wrong. Ever.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Then you run into maybe a category that combines a lot of all of the worst qualities that the few have, but you end up with the, diehard narcissist cop who is never wrong.
No.
And that's
I got
the
trained by
combination
one of those.
ego and never, 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 never wrong. When literally you could say to them, it's right here that shows you were wrong. And they will fight to their death. But they're also the ones that, you've heard me say this, they're the ones that are a great deal of fun for me. Because it doesn't take more than just a few little pokes until they lose their shit on the stand. Yeah, and I don't know if it's more fun. There were some judges that have passed away or are retired. 3 in particular, that was a great deal of fun to do because in all of us proponents of law enforcement, I actually, the first couple times I ran into this where I poked a little too much was as a prosecutor. And I had my officer up on the stand who then proceeded to lose their shit on me.
Yeah, I mean.
And it was like, I was just literally trying to figure out what happened because it was clear as mud in what I was reading.
Yeah.
And, it's a little bit different. And I think my opinion after all these years is I think a lot of people with questionable self-confidence, questionable emotional intelligence, questionable
Intelligence, just intelligence in general.
sometimes, okay, but I'm in a more like headspace kind of place of I think the questionable confidence or insecurities or ability to look, you're human. You're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. Hopefully none of our mistakes will result in somebody dying, but we all make mistakes. And I think there should be some way, I have no idea what it is, some big giant net that Natalie's invented, to find these people that cannot admit to being even that level of humanity. And I think that's a really low bar. As far as being human enough to say, I'm human, I make mistakes, I'm not perfect. And that those certainly are not people that should be wearing a badge or carrying a gun because they're just as dangerous. In more so, they're more a threat, I think, to their fellow officers than they are to my clients.
And they're more of a, no, I think they're just as bad of a threat to the general public.
Yes, but worse for me is I'm still that naive person, it's not a perfect system, but they're a threat to the entire integrity of the system. And making something that has problems, have bigger problems, and steer the focus of what should be getting fixed to other tangential bullshit that shouldn't be going on.
Well, I think the checks and balances are there. Number one is the academies, but they're not going to do shit because they're forced to put people on the street. They need to meet a number. The department needs so many officers. They got to find a way to get those people on the street. So they will overlook some things. Some things that they probably shouldn't overlook in order to get them to make it through. Then there are the judges and the attorneys like yourself. Like, you guys start making notes on these people, on these officers that are making these decisions, and you make this mental checklist of who is full of shit and who isn't. Now you've got the upper hand in court because you already know they're full of shit, and hopefully by you continuing to do your job well and correctly and honorably, this officer will learn. And the judges are also there to sit there and question these officers when they make mistakes, because I think the judges forget that they have the right to ask you a question if they want to. They don't just have to sit there and go back and forth. Like if it's a serious evidentiary question or a procedural question, why doesn't the judge ask for clarification? Like, what is your policy for that?
Have you ever been in a courtroom and had the privilege of seeing Judge Manning used to do this all the time, but have a judge inquire of an officer their own question because they can and they need some clarification, and then see an officer kind of unload and very poorly respond because they feel, again, more threatened because now we've got a big battle of, the egos once again between the two of them. And
I know you have to go, but this is the last thing I'm going to say. I think that, speaking specifically about law enforcement officers, they got to remember their place in the hierarchy. They got to remember their place in the scheme of things.
They have to know it before they can remember it.
Correct. But once you learn it, which you should learn, you should have an idea of where you sit before you become a cop. Like, this is what I'm doing. I am a public servant. Important word, servant. Not a public adjudicator, not a public Nazi, not a public arresting machine. Like, you are a public servant. You are the last thing that matters in the performance of your job. It is public, victims, property, helpless people. Everything matters more than you do. You are expected to put your life on the line for every single person you run into on that street if you are asked to do it. That's what you sign up to do. The minute you forget that you are there to serve the public and to make the streets a safer place for everyone, then you're already failing and you should probably quit and go work at fucking Walmart with a blue apron on and go, welcome to Walmart. Our specials today are baby diapers, 3 for $5. You know what I mean? Like, that's my personal opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I quit, is because I got to the point where I didn't feel that way anymore. I was so disgruntled by the job that I caught myself having thoughts that, like, well, I'm tired of dealing with these people. I don't want to do this anymore, you know? And I think the officers have to remember their place. You know, it's not to save the world. It's to try to protect the rights and the privileges and the lives of the people that are here now.
And maybe this is something we can do on our,
We can come back to this next time.
Play yard is, I think that there are, along with that, certain personality types that gravitate towards it that may not necessarily be very conducive to a servant mentality. And there's a great divide there where it should be a servant, but the people that are willing or gravitate towards law enforcement don't have that, are somewhat incapable of having it. But I think another thing that plays into it is perhaps, and I don't know how to do that, and I'm not sure I can accomplish it, but there should also be some poster at the end of the academy or above, the play like champions at Notre Dame that you have to hit as the players have to hit. There should be something like, check your anatomy size before you walk out this door and decide to prove it out on the streets, and check your mental and emotional wherewithal before you walk out this door.
They do have that. It's when they affirm the oath that they're given when they graduate the police academy.
No, I mean every damn day.
Yeah, to me, that's every damn day. You should wake up and remember that this is what you signed up to.
Louder for those in the back. Maybe we need a sign.
I know what you're saying, but and once again, this comes back to the fact that
same with lawyers.
If you're going to sit there and you don't have the personality for it, and you know that you're not, if you sit there going through that oath and going, yeah, and you're like, yeah, whatever.
But they're
when you
probably
get done,
the people, what the fuck else are they going to do?
Walmart's hiring.
They're too good to work
Hey, listen,
at Walmart.
Pretty soon we're going to have a whole lot more jobs. When Trump gets in office, there's going to be a whole lot more jobs. So.
But they're too good to work at Walmart.
Hey, listen, man, I quit and went back to driving a truck. Did I make the same money? So, it's out there. Hey, listen, guys, we got to go. Once again, technical difficulties today, so we have to cut this short. But
and I have to go back to being a mom.
Yeah, I think we should continue talking about this stuff because I got a lot to say on law enforcement, as you can tell. And I think that you can bring
I have
a lot.
A few tidbits.
I would love it to I just wish you could bring in like a case file, like all redacted, blacked out names, and let me read it, and then we could have like a trial right here on how we would operate inside this case.
Oh, I mean, we can do a full blown. I can bring in the whole posse. We can.
Bring something in and let's go. Let's go over it while we're sitting here. You could tell me the tidbits of what happened, and I can sit there and try to break it, try to chew their testimony down as a police officer.
We could have some fun with that.
Because I guarantee you.
Or maybe I'll chew it down and maybe you get to play defense attorney.
That's fine. I can tear up a police report pretty quickly because, you can read through the bullshit. We love you guys. Thanks for joining us. To be continued. Hey, and next week, hopefully all our cameras will work. And, China, I hate you. We love you. We'll see you next time.